Jim Allister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week we had the news that £192 million is to be spent building border posts at a border which some tell us doesn't exist. £192 million. It's quite clear that the propaganda that all that was at the border was what always was there for psychosanitary checks, for smuggling, etc., is patently false. Otherwise, you wouldn't be spending £192 million building border posts. I also had an answer last week from the Agriculture Minister telling me that there are 151 staff, DERA staff, employed at the border posts, and he needs more, and he's recruiting another 28. Now, what are they doing? Let me give you some examples. I have a constituent in Cullybackey who breeds budgies. Every year or so, he brings in a new budgie from England to vary the strain. Now, what does he have to do? He has to have a veterinary certificate in England on the budgie. He has to have a veterinary certificate in Northern Ireland when it arrives. He has to fill in all the paperwork. He has to pay all the fees. Who would have thought that the EU single market was so fragile that the import of a budgie from Cheltenham to Cullybackey puts it at risk? What else do they do? Well, we know, for example, that with the blue tongue designation, that there are cattle from Northern Ireland, bought in Scotland, bought in England, sitting there for months on end because they can't be brought in because EU law says otherwise. Yet cattle bought in France can transport through GB, come in unimpeded. Why? Because GB is regarded as a foreign country, whereas the cattle coming from France are regarded as coming from another part of the EU. I also heard a case recently of someone who shows birds across the water. He arrived back into Belfast, he was pulled in, and all his birds were sent back to England to be quarantined for 6 weeks. Birds that came from Northern Ireland, that went for a weekend show in England, sent back at his expense to be quarantined in England. And then there are some who think we're so foolish as to believe there's no sea border. Sadly, it continues to exist in all its ugliness and on all its partitioning of this United Kingdom.